Aloha everyone, young and old, and thank you for watching our program today. Sparky Would Go, a Kaua'i talk show for the whole family. United States Senator Spark Matsunaga was born on October 8, 1916, and raised on Kaua'i, Hawaii. Born Masayuki Matsunaga, the beloved Sparky nickname was given to him by his elementary school friends. Sparky liked the name so much, though, that he legally added it to his birth name after World War II. If we emphasize the life and works of our greatest contributors, people will come to realize that moral courage is bravery of the highest type, and America will be called the champion of peace. Sparky was a political visionary who dedicated his life to peace and a united world. This program series honors those people and organizations who are living examples of how to persevere through the hard times, showing us that our lives are worth living. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, and my name is Mark Jeffers, and we're so fortunate today because another episode, if you will, of Sparky Would Go is with a very special person, a Kaua'i kamaaina, and his name is Alan Faye Jr., and he's sitting right next to me. This young man has a whole lifetime of experiences that are such great stories, and I know you're going to enjoy this time together, so let's get started. Mr. Faye, can I call you Alan?
Sure.
All right. So, Alan, we want to know a little bit about what does it mean to be a kamaaina family, and can you talk about your grandfather and how did he get here?
That's a story. My grandfather was born in Norway, and he had 4 brothers, so there were 5 in the family. 4 brothers were all sea captains, but he wanted to be a farmer. He happened to have a cousin, Val Knudsen, who was living in Kaua'i, and they had just gotten permission from HSPA to start planting sugar cane of a certain type in Kaua'i.
Okay.
So my grandfather gets a letter, and the letter says, "Hans, you must come over and join me in raising cane." That was a good expression.
Good sense of humor.
So he gets on the boat, he comes over, and then he, as most travelers, they travel to the East Coast. Then he gets on a train to cut across country, and he was a tobacco smoker. So the train stopped in Nebraska or someplace, Iowa, Nebraska, and it stopped to put water in the tank.
Right.
And there's a tobacco shop right over there. So he, with his night clothes on, he went over and bought a pouch of tobacco. And he came out and started fixing his, and the train was going down the track. What does he do then? He starts yelling in Norwegian, "Stop, stop, stop!" And guess what? There happened to be a siding engine locomotive with a Norwegian engineer. And he heard grandfather talking in Norwegian. He said, "Come on top," and they chased the train down the track. They caught the train, and he got to Kaua'i.
He was meant to come to Kaua'i,
But
right?
can you imagine
the
odds of having the switch engine be a Norwegian?
A Norwegian, right.
And hearing him, I just think about all the time, my grandfather could have been a farmer in Iowa.
Yeah.
If nothing happened, he would have been a farmer, destitute, just growing corn in
One
Iowa.
place or another, right? Yeah. So he came to Kaua'i directly because Valdemar Knudsen was here, and Valdemar had been here for a number of years already.
And what they did was they realized that to grow sugarcane, especially on the west side, because weather's good there, but there's no water.
Right.
So they got up in the mountains.
Right.
And they built the Kaua'i ditch, which is now very famous. Without the Kaua'i ditch, they would have never been able to irrigate everything in the west side of Kaua'i.
Sure, sure. Where did they find the labor?
So they went up there, I don't know, but they found labor, and they built the ditch. Mm-hmm. And so it's called the Kaua'i ditch.
Yes.
And everybody, marvels at the fact that you get water from Kaua'i ditch. Lucky you.
15 miles or more of ditch system bringing water down to Kaua'i to grow sugar cane.
So that was one of the benefits that came from Grandpa Hans-Peter Faye, number 1.
Knowing about irrigation and how to grow things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was that part. Now the thing is, my grandfather had 5 sons. And so each one of them had their own specialty thing to do. Well, he decided they should all be educated because they were growing up in little Waimea town.
Right.
They should be educated in the East Coast. So he sent them off to Choate School, which at that time was a boarding school for boys only,
Where is Choate School?
in Wallingford, Connecticut,
Okay.
right near New Haven. It's sort of the prep school for Yale. You know, people graduate from Choate and they go to Yale.
I see. So it's a high school
It's a prep school.
prep school
Yeah.
for the colleges of the East Coast.
And what's
really.
interesting, it's a prep school that's very dressy. You had to wear a coat and tie to dinner. You had to go to chapel.
Yeah.
You had Sunday church. Everything was very formal. So it was like, wow, what a different lifestyle, right?
So what are these Hawaii boys that are usually barefoot? What did they do when they went to Connecticut?
Well, see, the point is that what they all did was they all found out what it was like to be on the other side of the world.
There we go.
And so they were very happy to get back over here and grow sugarcane and do the things they do here.
And your father was one of them.
Yeah. So I mean, he was a Choate graduate,
Uh-huh.
and I went there too. All of us in my generation went to Choate,
Wow, so you had two generations
Yeah.
who went to the East Coast to study.
and we learned all about rowing. We used to row with the tappins against the Yale Frash
Ah, okay.
on Lake Housatonic. The big
Long boats. Yeah.
boats, 4s and 8s.
Yeah.
So that was another experience. You don't get to rowing shells in Hawaii. They don't make them there. George Pocock from Seattle was the one that was building all these. The skin on these things was so thin.
Yeah.
You didn't ever put your foot on it. So I mean, they were made
Right.
ultimate.
And did they link up to Hawaii canoes or anything in here
No,
in
they
Hawaii?
never had any connection with Hawaii canoes.
Okay.
But they had races like canoe. We have canoe races. They had shell races.
Ah.
So that was interesting.
I remember seeing pictures of these beautiful canoes going down the river. I remember seeing those.
I've got pictures of canoes, of course, canoe racing in
Yes.
Hawaii. I have pictures of shells racing, a whole bunch of shells out on the river,
Beautiful.
Housatonic River.
Can you tell me how your father came from there
Yeah.
and then became the manager of Kaua'i sugarcane?
Actually, it was Waimea. His brother, Lindsay, was Kaua'i.
Ah, there we go.
Lindsay was the older brother. And then my father was the manager of Waimea.
Ah.
And later on, they combined the two.
So the sugar mill in Waimea used to be its own independent company,
Oh, yeah.
and Kaua'i Sugar, and then at some point
right.
they joined together.
Right.
Lindsay and Alan Fry Sr.
So, and the beauty of Waimea was that we had the perfect setting for a dairy.
Ah.
And it had to be the right kind of cows. Holsteins have too much butter fat in the milk.
Uh-huh.
But not Guernsey, what's the other one?
Jersey?
Ayrshire.
Oh, okay.
The buttermilk content, so we get all Ayrshire.
And so that was down in Waimea, right where the
right
coconut
next to the
trees
mill.
are. Yeah,
Right next to the mill.
Okay, good.
And not too far away was the pineapple cannery.
Okay.
And that was in Kaua'i, where the pineapple...
Sure.
And so they would grind up pineapple grind, and they would feed that to the cows. So we had the benefit of...
Very sweet milk, right?
Sweet milk, yeah. And so we had the best milk.
So now you grew up in Waimea. Your papa was a manager of Waimea Sugar.
Waimea Sugar Plantation.
And then where was your home in Waimea? And tell me about your brothers and sisters there and in the early years before you went to Choate.
Yeah.
What were some of your highlights of your experience in those days?
Well, of course, growing up in Waimea, you're in Waimea town.
Right.
You're going to Waimea school, and you walk to school barefooted.
Yeah. Dress up was wearing slippers, right?
Slipper. Oh, that was when you wear slippers. That was big
Yeah,
time.
big day, right?
So it was like, and then the other thing that growing up in Waimea was pidgin English.
Oh, pidgin. And you remember how
You
to talk
gotta know how to talk pidgin, eh, bruh?
And did you bring that to Choate? I'm just asking.
Well,
your pidgin language?
those of us from Hawaii would talk pidgin and they wouldn't know what we were talking about.
That's funny.
Here's all these chodies all sitting around, and we start talking pidgin. I said, "What are you guys? What are you talking about? You know, what's this?
What country are these guys from, right?
Yeah, how come you talk like that? You know."
So you had friends who were pidgin speakers, and then you guys had a great time in school, I assume. You did lots of things. Were you in sports? Were you?
Yeah. Well,
were you
I
a
did
surfer?
I told you I rowed on a crew. That was my main thing. I guess everybody surfs over here.
Sure.
So we surfed, and that was another thing. I learned how to surf from Duke Kahanamoku himself.
Oh, where?
At Royal Hawaiian Hotel, my parents took me over to Honolulu, and we're having breakfast on the Lanai. And Duke Kahanamoku comes up and says, "Hi, folks, where are you from?" And we said, "Kaua'i." "Oh, Kaua'i. How nice, what a place." He says, "Have you ever surfed on Kaua'i?" And I said, what is surf? I didn't know what surfing was.
Oh my God.
He said, "Well, you have a carpenter over there. He'll make you a plank of wood so long, and then you put a little hole up here so the water can shoot up, and then you make it this big, that big, that big, and you go teach yourself how to surf. You go out by Honolulu, by the by where there's surf.
Sure, that's where you
and
do
just
it.
to learn. So I learned how to surf. And so the funny thing was, oh my gosh, the funny thing was, the locals, Honolulu, they didn't know what surfing was.
Oh my gosh, this is in the 1930s.
Yeah, they body surf, you know.
Yeah.
But they didn't have surfboards. What is a surfbig?
Oh,
so
God.
I was like breaking the barrier about what is a surfboard.
I understand it, yeah.
So that was like a big event.
And just to flip it just a moment, I mean, how did you get to Hanalei? And tell us about that hukilau picture that we saw you guys do.
Did we have hukilau? Well, one thing my grandfather did do was he did build the first house in Hanalei. And I have a picture taken from a boat, I guess. Bare, Hanalei Beach. One house.
Oh.
That was our Hanalei house.
Right.
That was the only house. And on the Mauka side, there was a big water tank where they would collect water and purify it.
Sure.
And that was Hanalei. So talk about good luck. The hukilau was something that we all learned because they were already doing hukilau when we first started to go to Hanalei.
100 years.
So we learned all about how to do hukilau.
Yeah.
And they would tell us how, if the shark got into the net, what they would do with the shark, you know, like that. So I thought, wow, hukilau, it's really something else, you know.
Yeah.
Another avenue of excitement.
Culture, yeah, totally.
You take fish home, you know, everybody gets fish.
Yeah.
So that was Hanalei versus Waimea, because Waimea, there's no surf and there's nothing Waimea.
Right, right. And so you got to know Hawaiian culture from both sides of the island.
Yeah.
So your friends were Hawaiian, Japanese, Filipino. Tell us about your friends.
Well, I mean, they were, that didn't matter. You know, when you go to Waimea school, it's a mix of Waimea school. You get all the Portuguese, Filipino.
Yeah, sure.
So we all meld together. We walked to school together. So that was like, we're all brothers and sisters. And you know, so there's a sister, Valentine's sister, Claire, is real pretty. She's my girlfriend, you know, and she's Filipino. And so my father says, "Oh, you got a Filipino girlfriend?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, that's good." I said, "Oh, you don't mind that?" I said, "You know, some people like, other people say, oh, you don't want to mix like that." But he thought it was good too.
Yeah, sure.
So that was lucky to grow up, you know, lucky to live Waimea.
Right, so you got a cultural understanding at a very early age.
Yeah.
And for me, that's so important when you live in Hawaii, is to be able to get along with people of other cultures and call them your friends and do things with them, right?
You know, something else that I didn't mention, I was born in 1932.
That's right.
The height of the Depression. Mm-hmm. As a result of that, the population was down. So when I went to college or when I went to get a job, everybody wanted me because for engineering, all the airplane companies wanted me because there were not that many engineers. Not that many babies were born that year.
Sure.
So as I was graduating from University of Washington, I got a call from every airplane manufacturer in the United States. They said they would fly me over to their place.
Yeah.
They would show me their facility. I could learn all about the kind of airplanes they build and all that, because they were short of engineers.
Let's do this. you're on a good roll with this story. So let's go to your friend, Jimmy Hogue.
Oh, that was my cousin.
And we're going to talk about how Alan got excited about flying, which he spent most of his life doing. And let's take it from there. Tell us that story about Jimmy. Where did that happen?
Well, Jimmy Hogue was a second cousin of mine. He was from Maui. Mm-hmm. And he was in those days, maybe the only pilot for Inter-Island Airways, which later became Hawaiian Airlines.
I see.
Inter-Island Airways had a Sikorsky S-43, which is amphibians. They had, before the S-43, they had the S-28 that flew out of Hilo Bay, but it was only water only. But this is the first amphibian.
Oh, okay.
So my parents are taking me over to Honolulu for a visit, and we get on the plane, and I'm sitting in the seat right behind the co-pilot.
Yeah.
In those days, it's not like today. The pilots have to lock themselves in.
How many passengers were on this plane?
Well, it carried between 12 and 18 passengers.
That's a big
so
plane.
There might have been 15 passengers. It
Sure.
wasn't full. But I was sitting here. I could see him doing everything, I kept looking like this, he kept looking back. Like he knew I was a cousin.
Yeah.
So we climb up. We get to 8,000 feet level flight.
Yeah.
We're out of air traffic control and all that. So you got assigned altitude. You can do anything you want. So he turns around and he says, "Hey, come on up here." So I unbuckle my seatbelt and I very carefully go up there and I sit on his lap.
That's funny.
And he said, "This is interesting." He said, because airplanes have this one problem, that when you turn too fast, it goes the wrong way. The nose goes the wrong way.
Sure.
So you have rudder pedals. That's why you have rudder pedals.
Yeah.
However, he said, if you very gently turn the airplane, you don't need the rudder pedals.
Ah.
So he said, "I want you to show me how you do a gentle turn." So I said, okay. So I very gently turned, and sure enough, didn't need rudder pedals. And he said, "Turn the other way." So I turned the other way. So now we did turns up and down. Now let's do a little climb and a little descent.
Yeah, yeah.
So we did that. I said, wow. I said, I was struck with a bug of flying.
How old were you then?
That was, that was 41, just before the war.
Right.
Just before the war.
Right.
And the thing was that...
So you were 8 or 9 years old.
9 years old.
Yeah.
So that's a good age,
Yeah, sure.
to be impressed.
Sure.
So here's the funny thing. Kennedy's Hawaiian Airlines book has this story about me sitting on Jimmy Hogue's lap. And the story goes like this. The story says that Alan was sitting on Jimmy Hogue's lap, and he asked him, "What's that little window that's on the side of the airplane?" And I did ask, this is true. I said, "Jimmy, what's that little window there?" And he said, "Well, it's a sliding window that opened, and they put the passenger manifest. When the airplane's loaded, ready to go, we get the list of who's in the airplane."
Oh, there we go.
That's the last thing that goes, and then we leave.
Yeah.
So I said, "Oh, wow." I said, I slid the window open, and you could hear the 90 miles per hour winding going by. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I said, "What would happen if I stick my finger out the window?" He said, "It would break off." Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I said,
You knew
"Pull
what
it
to
back."
do. He
Pull
didn't
it
ask
with
you
it.
there, right?
He was kidding, of course.
Yeah.
But that was so funny because I believed that my finger's going to break out at 90 miles an hour wind.
Sure.
It's a joke.
Sure, sure. So now what's happening here is that you're have this experience of flying, and it goes into your life,
Yeah.
and it begins to churn in there, and so you begin to set your own course
Yeah.
toward that. Now, how
yeah.
did your parents knew to send you to Choate,
Yeah.
and what age were you when you went to, no wait, you went to Punahou first.
Well, Punahou for one year, just because I got flunked in math for a political reason. I got flunked in math at Waimea School. They sent me to Punahou to pass math, and I passed it brilliantly. There was a personality,
Yeah.
Japanese versus Haole problem with the teacher.
Right.
So I went to Honolulu, got my math grade, then I went to Choate.
When you were in Punahou, I have to ask, were you in boarding school? Did you live in Honolulu at that
I
time?
stayed at Castle Hall.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, Castle Hall. That was in the days they had boarding school.
Yeah, sure. And then from there you went to Choate, an intermediate school.
Right, and that's when all my cousins, we all went to Choate together.
Oh, that's great.
We were all juniors.
Uh-huh.
Alan Jr., Lindsay Jr., Peter Jr., Mark Jr., like that. So
The junior Hawaii contingency.
yeah, of course we got slammed a lot because we were from, where's that dumb place in Hawaii?
Yeah.
You know, people back there didn't understand. They thought we were natives, you know.
Sure, yeah,
So,
sure.
You're from where?
Yeah. Did you get any ridicule or teasing other than that? Did you fit in? Did you feel really at home?
Yeah, in time you do.
Yeah.
You get accepted because you do certain things, and I rode on the crew, and that was good because then I got points for that.
And how did your course of study line you up with becoming into aviation
Well, that was
as a
the
career?
thing. You could take options there, and I wanted to go. I knew I was going to go into aeronautics, so I took all the classes in physics that had to do anything with aviation.
Ah, there we go.
So then, when it's time to go to college, all of my cousins went to Stanford, which was, you know, the school to go.
Sure.
The school, Stanford.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to University of Washington, which is not like Stanford because it's not Stanford, but it's where Boeing is.
Ah, yeah, up north in Seattle.
So I went to
Right.
Boeing, and so when I was working at school, I was also a summer job and stuff with Boeing.
Ah.
So I had the advantage. But then all this time, you got to remember, like I said, being born in a minority status, anybody can get the jobs.
Yeah. Well, it's a time of depression as
Yeah,
well.
and
right?
so I had the benefit of that. I could get any job I wanted. Yeah.
But let's follow your career there. Just follow it right into Boeing. Tell us, how did you get that job at Boeing, and how did that
Well, it's
happen?
because when I was going to college at Boeing in Seattle, University of Washington, I was taking summer programs, and I worked at summertime in Boeing preliminary design.
Okay, I get it.
So I had
get
a
it.
background there.
Yeah.
And then, just by luck, I really wanted to go to work for NACA. Not very many people know what NACA stands for.
Yeah.
You know what NASA stands for.
Sure.
NACA was National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which had all to do with engines, propellers, wings, and all that,
The whole evolution of the technology.
but not space.
Uh-huh.
So I went to work for NACA, Ames Aeronautical Laboratory, and a year from the date that I started there, Sputnik went off.
Ah, the Russian satellite launch that created the whole competitive
And that
American-Russian.
suddenly,
Yeah.
and we were still NACA. So they said, we've got to have a NASA now. So that's how NASA got created, because of the Sputnik.
Ah, wow, that ties something together.
Talk
for
about
me.
good timing, right?
Yeah.
Here I am getting to be in aeronautics, and suddenly I'm in space.
So, but the origins of NASA came from that time,
Yeah.
and you must have been really excited, Alan,
Oh, sure.
to be a part of that.
You know, the thing about NASA is everybody thinks that NASA is Cape Kennedy, where they launched the Cape Canaveral, you know, where they launched
Yeah,
the...
sure.
They thought, oh, that's NASA. But actually, NASA, we have... hello. A little background noise.
Yeah.
We have aeronautics, airplane design in Cleveland, Ohio. And propulsion in Cleveland. Mostly the lake bed, Edwards Air Force Base is where all the high-speed stuff is. Ames Research Center was where all the other airplane work was done.
I see you. So you guys were all over the United States, and you were combining those what you were learning.
NASA,
that was what NASA was.
Yeah, that's what we
starting
became.
out.
And because when I first went to work there, I had a program called the X-14. That was something that Wright-Patterson couldn't make it fly. So they gave it to me as a project to see if I could make it work.
X-14?
X-14. It was a vertical takeoff jet.
Sounds exciting.
2 jet engines, lift off like this. You could translate this that way, that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the low speed end. My friend Neil Armstrong down at NACA Edwards was flying the X-15, which is the fastest airplane in the world.
Now you know who Neil Armstrong is, everybody, right? He's the first person who put his foot on the moon, right?
Yep, Neil Armstrong. He became a good friend because he was flying the high-speed X-15, and I was working on the low-speed X-14. So when Neil was getting ready to go to the moon, we invited him to Moffett Field, and we programmed the X-14 so it would approach and land on the moon with the same gravity, 1/6 the gravity of Earth.
I see.
So we had Neil making landings on the moon
Uh-huh.
in a simulator, which is a real airplane.
Sure.
So when he and Buzz Aldrin were in the limb approaching the moon, the best information they had was film that had been taken from orbiting spacecraft. But
Sure.
they didn't realize until they got to the surface that it was going to be a disaster, a pile of rocks. That would have been the end of the mission. They would have been dead.
Yeah.
So Neil says, I got it. And Buzz said, you got it. So Neil then remembered what he did when he flew the X-14. He flew it just like the X-14. He flew it just the right amount of thrust, maneuvered it over here. He set it down. He was just out of the last seconds of fuel when it stopped.
Oh, my gosh.
Believe me, he came back to Ames. Oh, the other thing. Oh, people don't realize this. But when he came back from the moon trip, President Nixon took him all around the world.
Oh, I didn't know that.
To tell him what a great job he did.
Yeah.
He's a farm boy from Illinois.
Now, let me recap that for what's going on here.
Yeah.
What you're saying is they had 2 or 3 places in the United States where they were training people in the NACA and NASA, and this was leading to their journey to the moon in the Apollo missions.
Right.
And Alan was teaching people how to
Fly the vertical
with the X-14.
Right, right.
And because of his training of Neil and Buzz, they were able to actually maneuver their landing on the moon and do it safely and accurately.
Right, right.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
Well, something else. When he came back from the moon, President Nixon took him all around the world and just made a big fanfare.
Sure.
And he was a farm boy from Connecticut, from Illinois.
Yeah.
He didn't want any of this. So as soon as he got back, he said, I'm out of the astronaut corps. I want to be in aeronautics. So what they did at that point was they made him the head of aeronautics for all of for NASA. So then his very first thing to do after he became the head of aeronautics was to go visit each one of the NASA centers and find out what we were doing in aeronautics, not space, but aeronautics.
I see.
So he came to Ames.
Yeah.
And I was the administrative assistant, so I was charged with giving him the tour about what's...
And he remembered you from the training.
So. Oh, yeah. So we were good friends to begin with. I mean, we were good friends. And so Neil said, one thing I've got to ask you a favor, Alan. He said, I know how these secretaries are. When we take them around, they all want me to sign Neil Armstrong on their pictures.
Right.
He said, I will not do that. I don't want to have my name scribbled on them. So guess what?
I know where it's going.
Guess what?
Yeah.
So I take him around every different place, wind tunnels, simulators, all this stuff. We get back to the ad building, and he has to turn his badge in like everybody has a badge, turns it in.
Yeah.
And then he was going to go out the back door to go home. So he puts his badge down. We open the door, and here are all these secretaries lined up with their pictures.
To be expected.
And he said, I thought you said that they wouldn't bother me for signatures. I said, can you really control a secretary? Who's going to ask you to sign your name? He said, I guess not. So he, instead of writing Neil Armstrong, he did like they do in Mexico. When you go across the border, instead of signing, they go, and they go,
yeah.
So he did that with each one of the secretaries. Thinking he did this.
But they got what they wanted.
They got what they wanted.
Yeah.
But they didn't say Neil Armstrong. He did it like this.
That's totally great. I'd like to bring it back to Kaua'i, though, and then we'll go back to finish your time at there. So can we talk about Burns Field and Pearl Harbor? Because that's before you went to NASA, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to bring it back now, and Alan is just such a great storyteller. I mean, I hope you're getting a sense of these details that he's got. But there's a very amazing time in the history of Kauai when World War II was imminent, and you were working for sugarcane for the plantation, or
I worked in the dairy.
Okay, you worked in the dairy.
We had the dairy going.
What happened there with the introduction or the beginning of the war, if you will?
Well, of course, we had to build air raid shelters.
Yeah.
We had air raid alerts all the time. And
You're afraid of Japanese planes bombing?
no, submarines.
Oh, submarines.
In fact, there was a submarine while Pearl Harbor was being attacked. There was a submarine that went into Nauwili.
Wow.
And they fired. They were going to blow up the fuel tanks on the hill up there. You know,
Yeah.
they had all the fuel for the islands up on the hill.
Right.
And they shot 2 or 3 from the submarine. The bullets went through the tanks, but they didn't explode. the tanks spilled. They lost the oil and stuff, but they never burned. And that was a submarine that was laying off of Kaua'i.
Uh-huh.
And so people thought, well, if there's a submarine in Nauwili, there could be submarine any place. So we had to be very careful.
You're talking about West Kauai now, on the
Yeah.
coast there, right?
And the very next thing they did was to build barbed wire fences. That was the biggest thing in World War II, was all the beaches. You go to Brennike's Beach to go body surfing, barbed wire.
Barbed wire everywhere, yeah.
It got so thick, barbed wire would rust, and they'd put another layer of barbed wire. And it kept laying, and pretty soon it got so bad that you couldn't even see through the barbed wire.
Oh, my gosh.
It was just a mess. So you go down the beach to go body surfing, like at Brennike's, you had to go around where the barbed wire wasn't, go under there, then go through underneath, and then come up the other side and go body surf.
Now, you knew a lot about what was going on at Burns Field and
Yeah.
Port Allen at the time. Now, was Port Allen a functioning harbor at that time, right?
Well, Port Allen was a port, but Burns Field was the runway, the airport.
Yeah.
And that was, later on they changed the name, but it was always called Burns Field, and that's where the airplanes took off and landed. The Sikorsky's amphibians. So when you went to Honolulu, you go to Burns Field.
Burns Field, and you checked in like a regular airline terminal there and got your flight. About how many flights were coming in and out of there, Alan? Do you remember?
Oh, maybe
A couple a day?
1 or 2 or 3 a day.
Yeah.
And the thing was, the day of Pearl Harbor, all the sugar plantation managers were scheduled to be in Honolulu
Yeah.
for the annual meeting of HSP, Hawaiian Sugar Planters Association.
Sure.
That's when they talk about the different varieties of cane. So all the managers, there were about 8 managers, Kilauea, Lihue, you know, all that,
Yeah.
Waimea, Keka, were all at the airport waiting for...
They're all going to fly in the same plane.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only airplane you got.
Yeah.
Either that or you take an overnight tugboat. But, so we're all there, and it's supposed to be next morning at Alexander Hotel in Honolulu.
Uh-huh.
So they're all waiting for the plane, they're all talking sugar talker. And I'm over here with Ambrose listening to his car radio.
Uh-huh.
And we're listening to Webley Edwards, who's telling us, oh, this is some day, this is Sunday morning, but they sure have something.
Now, Webley Edwards, he was a radio announcer at KGU, did you say? Or what?
KGMB.
KGMB.
Later on, he became very famous with what program was called Hawaii Calls.
Hawaii Calls, right?
We used to go, when I was going to college, believe it or not, University of Washington, and you were homesick, you'd go listen to Hawaii Calls because they had about an hour and a half of Hawaiian music.
Sure.
And we'd sit and listen to him, we'd get homesick.
Tears in the eyes.
And that was Webley Edwards.
Yeah, okay.
He went from just a little kid running a radio just to keep the radio going on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I mean, they had no reason to have a radio running, but he was just ad-libbing and talking about.
So there he is broadcasting on Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941.
One, and in the distance you could see. He said, "This is so real." There's all that black smoke out there, Diamond Head. I mean, not the Pearl Harbor area.
Yeah.
He's saying all that, and Ambrose and us, we're listening to him while he's talking. This happened. Ambrose had one of the few station wagons that had a radio.
Uh-huh.
So we're both listening. And then he says, it's just about this time we're listening, a Jap Zero comes over, and he's up like this. I guess you could see the meatball in his wing. And so you knew it was an enemy plane, and it dropped a bomb right next to the radio station. It blew up. It destroyed a building right there. And so Webley Edwards' first comment was, that was no maneuver, this is the real McCoy.
Ah.
The radio station went blank. Then they started, that's when the National Guard came out and picked up trucks.
So now, but you guys were at Burns Field,
Yeah.
and who's the guy, Ambrose? Who is he?
Ambrose Smith was my Uncle Lindsay's driver.
I see.
Lindsay Faye was plantation manager at Kaua'i.
Right.
So Ambrose brought Lindsay there and was waiting until Lindsay went away, and then he'd go back home.
Okay, so you're all at the airport, and Weberly goes off the air.
Yeah, well, he cuts off when he says this is no. He saw the Jap bomb.
No drill. Yeah.
He said this is no maneuvers. This is the real McCoy.
Yeah.
And they cut the radio off right there, and then dead silence for a little while, and then all of a sudden, there's this is Commander. No, this is General so and so, General Short. I remember this is General Short in command of Armed Forces in Pacific, and I want to tell you we are definitely under attack by Japanese, by Japan.
Wow.
So we heard that on this little radio.
So KGMB was still broadcasting?
KTOH.
K2H, I get it.
It was a station that was right on the road to the airport here.
Oh, okay.
KTOH was the Kaua'i radio station.
I love it.
And Needle Nose was the guy that used to put his needle on the records.
Uh-huh.
So when he played music, he said, "This is Needle Nose on KTOH. I'll be playing you." That was KTOH. Hey, talk about small town, right?
Yeah. So what did you guys do when you heard that the war had started? What did you
Well, the first thing you do is you start building a bomb shelter.
Okay.
Then they issue gas masks. We all had to wear gas masks. I have pictures of us, my cousin Tony and I. We're next to our air raid shelter. You can see the shelter with all the bulkheads and all that stuff. The way they built the air raid shelter was they took a cane truck frame and put it upside down on the ground. Then they dug out and they put earth over it and they built it. They covered it all up with.
Oh, okay.
So it was a truck frame
Sure.
that became the air raid shelter.
I see.
And it had these little revetments so that when you had to go inside, you had to go through these little revetments.
So was the whole area there at Pu'olo Point, was that many of those little shelters? Or, and I know that Jack Hata told me about the bunks, the dormitories that were built there. There were other things that were built by the military in that area that were...
Yeah, that came later, of course.
Yeah.
But basically what was there was just the facility for the airport.
What happened to the managers right there? At some point, you must have just turned around and went back home.
They went home fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact,
Get back to their business.
Well, that was the thing they told us. They said, you go home if you don't have any lights on in your house. If you have lights on, you put blue cellophane and keep the light as low as you can because there's submarines offshore. Because that submarine had been attacking the day before.
Right.
So that was the very beginning. And then, of course, you're going to school, and the first thing they do is they issue a gas mask, and you have to be wearing your gas mask all the time.
Oh, my gosh.
So the picture of Tony and me, we're by the air raid shelter. We both have our gas masks hanging on our thighs.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you remember, you told me this part of this story, which was the incident of the airplane landing on Niihau.
Oh, yeah.
And that became quite a big story. It was, a lot of people knew of the story.
You know, that was interesting. My grandfather, who was in Waimea, or Kikaho, growing sugarcane, and his future wife had a dairy in Molowa'a on Kaua'i. Mm-hmm. They were both invited by the Robinsons to spend a couple of nights on Niihau. Robinsons had these little, like, beach cottages.
I see.
And they would invite guests to come over just to experience the island of Niihau.
Yeah.
Which was very rare. Well, they happened to invite my grandfather from Waimea, my grandmother from Molowa'a. They met there. And of course, as things happened, they got married eventually. But what he had to do in order to court her, he had to ride his donkey all the way from Waimea to Molowa'a to see his future bride.
I know that feeling myself.
So can you imagine? Can you imagine, grandfather?
It must have taken him hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, and then he has 5 sons. You know.
Oh, I see.
So I mean, the family really did well. I mean,
right.
The fact that we got grandmother.
Well, that's why the word kamaaina is so special, because you're people of the land, and you guys adapted that so well, even though you came from somewhere else, and you dug right in and made that happen, and really created so much of what Hawaii that we know now. You created that. So this incident on Niihau was a Japanese pilot that landed there, huh?
Yeah, his airplane got damaged, so he landed there, and he was knocked out. While he was knocked out, Ben Kanahele, who was the chief of Niihau, came over and found his pistol and took his pistol.
Oh, okay.
So then the Japanese, when he came to, he realized that somebody got his pistol.
Yeah.
He didn't speak English, but he brought his pistol cover, and he pointed at it. And you think Kanahele's going to give him his gun? No way. So then it turns out Kanahele's wife, big Hawaiian lady, right? She sees that this Japanese pilot is going to do damage to. In fact, what he did was he found the gun and he shot Kanahele 3 times in the gut.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he shot Kanahele 3 times in the gut. So the wife picked up this Japanese pilot, turned him upside down, and bashed his head on the rocks. killed him on the spot. And the next thing that happened, you know, the Robinsons had a thing that if there was a problem on the island, they're supposed to light a fire in a certain place.
Sure.
So they lit the fire, and so the Robinsons sent a rowboat or some kind of boat over there, and they went over and they brought Kanahele back.
Oh, okay.
Waimea didn't have a hospital in those days. It was dispensary.
Oh, okay.
All plantations had dispensaries. So the nurse from the dispensary came down to Waimea Landing, the pier,
Yeah.
just as the boat got there from Niihau. With Kanahele, the three bullets in his gut.
3 bullets in his gut.
And I was on the beach. Of course, you know, they had no barbed wire yet. So I went down the beach and I watched them come in. I watched the nurse take him and put him in a wheelchair and take him up. I said, wow, I didn't know anything about this. I knew nothing about this Niihau problem.
So
until,
and this is at Pakala?
No, Waimea Landing.
Waimea Landing, okay.
Yeah, you know where the pier is.
Sure.
It's the same landing. Everything's still there. Landing's still there. So that was like another bit of war experience that you get.
I think it's an amazing story, and few people know of it, but when you hear it, you're going, Kaua'i was really involved at many different levels. And a lot of Kaua'i boys joined the service.
442nd, yeah. Danny Nui.
Right, and Sparky Matsunaga.
Sparky.
Yeah.
Ike is in our place here at Puakea. He's 101 years old. Every morning he comes in for breakfast. He's one of the most decorated 442nd. He's 101 years old.
Oh my gosh.
He comes in every morning, says, good morning, you know, we all tell you hi.
That's great. And did you ever have a chance to talk with him about his experiences?
I talked to him. I told him, I said, I know all about 442nd.
Yeah.
Because I said, I got to know Daniel Inouye very well. And he said, oh yeah, Daniel Inouye was one of the very best of the whole 100th Battalion. And of course, he lost an arm.
Sure. Can you tell us, Alan, let's take it back a little bit. Let's go into your family a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell us about meeting your wife. Tell us about your children. I know you have many people who love you and take care of you. How did your family evolve, and where did you live with your family when you were working at NASA?
I was working at NASA. I was in Moffett Field.
Yeah.
So actually, I married a girl that was from Kaua'i.
Oh.
And her family grew up right in back of Nono Mountain, Sleeping Giant.
Sure.
That was the Eckert family.
Oh,
So she was my first wife. And then things went along fine. We had 3 kids. And everything went fine. And then things went bad. So we kind of separated. And pretty soon I got married again.
Oh.
And so the married person is strong hula lady. She's big time in hula.
Yeah.
So that was what really impressed me, was her hula.
Oh yeah,
and her kids were
the die for, right?
So anyway, that was wife number 2. So you know, I've had 2 wives, but I've had basically like 2 lives because they're different. They're
2 wives, 2 lives.
Yeah, because you know she's hula, she's Mrs. Hula.
So where were you living? Your family was living on the mainland?
Well,
Your
actually,
children were growing up on the
yeah,
mainland?
we lived in Sunnyvale, California.
I see.
And we built, what should I say? We built houses in Waimea,
Yeah.
which later became Waimea Plantation Cottages.
So did you have that vision of a visitor-oriented situation using plantation houses?
Interesting.
Yeah, how'd that vision come about?
Well, one night we got a warning that there was a hurricane coming.
Wow.
But this tidal wave. The tidal wave coming. But this time the tidal wave is coming from this direction that comes into Waimea.
Ah, from the south then.
Yeah, it came in and it washed a lot of the buildings away.
Uh-huh.
And so we had buildings that we had built just for guest houses.
Yeah.
And they were all scattered all around.
Oh my gosh.
So we decided, maybe we could make a little resort out of this. So that's where Waimea Plantation Cottages came from.
Because the tsunami had moved the houses around.
And now Waimea Plantation Cottages is one of the best places to
Oh, it's
go.
a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place. Our cameraman just stayed there.
So isn't it funny how one thing leads to another?
Yeah, sure.
First thing you think is, oh, what a disaster. The next thing you know, the disaster was made to our benefit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, when we're thinking about you guys' choice to create that, it's really, in a lot of ways, helped to define Waimea as a visitor destination, as a place where many cultural events happen. Oh, yeah. Which reminds me, the Lions Club is one of those organizations that really gets deeply into the community and tries to benefit the community. So at some point, you came back to live in the islands with your family.
I joined the North Shore Lions Club, and I was in there forever. I made it up the different ladders, and so we had sight is beautiful. Sight and vision. Mm-hmm. I mean, vision and sound.
Yes.
So we did that. We had pancake breakfast fundraisers for the community.
So you're helping children to be able to be tested with their ear and their sight, and to compensate if there's any problems with those things, right?
And then we'd have these fantastic pancake breakfasts.
Oh yeah.
Fundraisers.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And did you do Easter egg hunt?
Oh yeah, we did everything.
Yeah.
So we helped the community enjoy more life has to offer.
Did you build things in the community, like bus stops or parking lots? Or
we built bus stops.
Now this was in the Hanalei community.
Yeah, this is actually Kilauea.
I see.
So most things that we did were having to do with Kilauea.
What made you decide to join the Lions or be a part of a group like that?
Well, just because the friends that I hung out with were already Lions.
Yeah.
Gary Pacheco, I don't know if you can hear it. Gary Pacheco is a Hawaiian telephone company.
Right.
He was also our treasurer.
Oh, okay.
Still is.
Oh my gosh. Whoa, that's taking it back.
He says, "Hey, Faye, you got to come join the North Shore Lions Club." I said, "What's that?" From then on, it was like, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah, and then they tell you something like, "Oh, by the way, you can never resign. You're here for life." Right? Yeah, I understand that one for sure.
So there was the people that were in the club made the club.
Sure.
As most things happen.
Yeah. And every year or every 2 years, you decide on what you're going to work on, what your mission is, and what you want to try to bring about in the community, right? Well, I'm thinking of Waimea with that, too, because we have a West Kauai Lions.
Oh, yeah.
And, Waimea is a town that really is proud of itself.
Oh, sure.
And they do their festivals every year. And so you must be a proud citizen of Kauai and different places of Kauai.
I'm lucky I was born in Waimea.
Yeah. What stands out for you, Alan, in terms of how Kauai has changed and become the island it is now? Were you surprised by the changes that happened here on Kauai? I mean, from sugarcane to tourism is one, for sure,
The big thing was losing our dairy and losing our sugar.
Yeah.
Our dairy, we supplied the whole island. Mr. Shimada would deliver milk all the way to Haena.
Oh, wow.
And in order to and we delivered in glass bottles.
Yeah.
So you could hear Shimada coming down the road. You could hear the full bottles rattling. He comes in and, you want to buy a quart of milk? You trade in one bottle and you get a new quart of milk. So
Yeah.
we recycled all our milk.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So as he was leaving, you could hear him, Shimada's driving away, rattle, 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 as he's going away. And I still have a picture of the dairy with 5 trucks all lined up.
Oh, we want to see that one. That's a good one. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Will we ever have another dairy here in Kauai, do you think, Alan?
I wish we would.
Yeah. No, it's a positive thing, for sure.
It is, and if you get the right kind of cows,
Yeah.
and you feed them the right kind of milk. Like I said, we used milk flow from the cannery, which was ground up
Pineapple.
pineapple, yeah.
Right.
And that added, and of course we did other add-ons to make the fuel, very healthy for the cow.
So Kauai is essentially the strongest when it has a strong agricultural base.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And growing houses and subdivisions is not exactly the strongest. We don't have to get into the politics of it, but
Yeah.
okay, it's a visitor destination. But if we become an island of, visitor
Visitors.
housing and hotels and stuff, then our own people have a hard time living here, right?
Well, everybody's working to support the visitors.
Their families, yeah.
Well, so that when people come, they come to the cottages. All the people that take care of the cottages, they're all learning, getting their income basically from the visitors.
That's right. So there needs to be a balance with agricultural and visitor industry,
Yeah.
is my point.
Oh, it's hard to do that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so now we want to go into your musical career and then maybe come back to how you ended up with NASA, because I don't think we really completed that story. So do you want to tell us how you got into music? I mean, other than the fact of really enjoying listening to Hawaii Calls when you were a student?
Interesting thing about music, here we are, World War II, air raid shelter, right?
Yeah.
You sometimes spend the whole night in the air raid shelter because they don't know when the threat's going to go away.
Sure.
My mother had a Martin ukulele.
Oh, that's the big
That
one.
was the original ukulele.
Yeah, right.
My mother taught me how to play the ukulele.
Oh, my gosh. Well,
So I had the best of all worlds. I had the best ukulele built by Martin.
Yeah.
And I had a teacher who was very patient, learning all the chords and how to strum.
but you know how to discipline you
How
too,
to
right?
pick, too. Picking is another thing.
Yeah.
You can pick, there's strumming, and then you can do that,
Yeah,
too.
sure.
So luckily, my mother was a teacher, of course,
Uh-huh.
had all those benefits.
And so did you play with a group that was performing hula
Well,
to begin with, or how did you step up to the plate there?
If you look at this picture right here,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm playing over here on this side.
Yeah.
Here's Ambrose.
Yeah.
Here's our bass player. Here's Ed Panua. He's my tax man.
Oh, yeah.
So I was playing with the kamaa'inas for years.
So how did your group form? When did you start performing?
Well,
This looks like David Sprout.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because Ambrose started the kamaa'inas. he put the whole thing together.
Oh, is that right?
And they played all kinds of events, you know, weddings.
So weddings and first baby luau's and things like that, right?
All those good things. And everybody knew Ambrose.
Yeah, okay.
Because, you know, he had been my uncle's chauffeur, but then later on he became the leader of the band, so to speak. He was the head man for making music.
Right. So you got the call, we're going out this Saturday and we're going to be playing over here. And was that over a long period of time, or did you guys get together to rehearse or just play for fun?
Well, what happened was we started out with a restaurant. Mm-hmm. And then it went for a while, and Ambrose was playing there all the time.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually it closed.
I see.
Then there's Wranglers up the street. But then they moved, basically, the Hawaiian musicians moved to wherever they could be invited to play.
I see. Right.
And they performed every place, you know.
Okay, so you guys were well known in the community, and you could be asked on the drop of a hat to perform somewhere. That's great.
Yeah, that was good.
And then did you have hula dancers that were with your company all the time? That's great.
A lot of times what's interesting is you start to play some nice Hawaiian music.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere comes all these hula dancers.
Why does that happen?
They step in. They recognize the song. Right away, they're dancing the hula for that song.
And that's the best thing for a musician, because somebody's dancing and enjoying your music.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
And it always impresses us that you have a certain song, and the hula ladies all know that song.
Yeah.
And they get up, even down here in our dining room.
Yeah.
We play music. Somebody starts dancing.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah, you got them. So tell me this. When you're playing music, what would you call your favorite tune or your favorite style of music? What do you really enjoy the most with your music, Alan?
Well, if I can do it right, I like to pick.
Yeah.
I like to strum the right songs, but I like to pick too.
Yeah.
But my mother taught me how to do that.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of talent. You know, I'm a member of a group of NASA retirees.
Oh.
And we have, every month or so, we have a special person we invite to participate. It's called Owl Feathers, having to do with the owl.
Oh, okay.
And so what happened was we have a list of who's all an owl feather person.
An owl feather person, right.
And so I got my name on there. And so one day, a person that was an owl feather contacted me, and he said, "How many airplanes have you flown?" So I started to add them up. I got my logbooks out.
Oh, yeah.
I flew about everything. I flew every Cessna that they ever built, every Beechcraft, every this, that, and the other thing. I flew them all, and I taught flying for 40 years. So once I did that, he said, "Oh, I had no idea you did that much flying." And I said, "Well, I'm lucky I'm still alive because I almost crashed a few times."
I mean, there's some stories.
Everybody that flies that much is going to have a couple of
Sure, yeah. You can't. It's just racking up the miles, right?
So you got to be lucky.
Yeah. Did you have a little good luck thing that you brought?
Yeah, you got to wear the good luck charm.
Okay, you got to wear it. You got to bring it with you, right?
Here's my NASA badge.
Why don't we talk a little bit about how you ended your time at NASA?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm assuming at that point you made a decision to come back to Kaua'i with your family, those kinds of things.
Interesting thing that you say that. I had two projects that were killer projects. We had a PhD working for us. He went all around the world, 40 or 50 countries.
Wow.
To find out if they could have a use for a hybrid airship, which is an airship that has a bag of helium and then a whole bunch of rotors. You could do heavy lift.
Wow.
He came out with, for 2,000 tonners, something like 1,000 airships, hybrid airships.
Uh-huh.
So I got a budget.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to build a demonstrator. Because we built flight simulators at NASA Ames. I'm going to make this simulator fly like a airship like that. I got budget. Man, I'm cooking well, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? I'm just about ready to, and I hired PhDs to help me. Just when the program started, the space shuttle program ran into a budget problem, and NASA couldn't get new budget money in a hurry, so they took my money away.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, my program is in hold.
Yeah.
Well, I have PhDs working for me. You don't keep a PhD just sitting there twiddling his thumbs. So after a while, that team went away. So I said, "Oh, that's really too bad because that was a winner."
Yeah.
And then so it's like tough luck, you know.
Was it developed later? Did it come back as a project?
Well, you know what we did? We figured out Weyerhaeuser lumber had acres that they couldn't harvest in Oregon, and the only way they could harvest it would be to lift it because they couldn't. We're not allowed to build roads in there.
Sure.
Would be pick it up with an airship.
With an airship.
With a hybrid airship. I made a deal with them. I said, if we can harvest that stand of timber that you can't harvest, and we can haul it over to a sawmill on the Oregon coast, and you sell the lumber, can you give us the net profit from all that?
That sounds like quite a deal.
They agreed.
Whoa.
They agreed.
Yeah.
So we were back on. Well, meanwhile, it took time to do that. And meanwhile, I lost 2 PhDs that were going to work for me. And by the time that we got the approval to do it, I lost my workforce.
I see.
So that's what happens in life.
Yeah, because you're working and you're looking for opportunities. We call that being resourceful.
Yeah.
You find things that you can bring up and use, and as long as you can make it work.
And it was self-generating, so there was no fuel expended even because it was all done by rotary and helium.
Sure. So how did your career at NASA come to an end?
Well, that was the thing. I got a question from our administrator. He came down and he said, you know, I've got various divisions. You could be a division chief here, a division chief there. You could do there. Or, this was November of 1980. He said, you know, in April 1st of next year, you'll have 25 years there.
Yeah.
You can retire at NASA. Good. Where do I sign?
25 years, yeah.
So I left there and went back to work at our Kikyo Land Company.
Okay, there we go. Okay, good. So that brings you back to Kaua'i.
That brought me back to Hawaii.
And when you came back, how much of your family was still living with you? Everyone?
They were pretty well on their own by that time.
I see.
They were in school or married or with having families.
And where were you living then, Alan, when you came back and you worked for the land company?
Well, I had a house down here.
Okay,
so
on this side of the island. Okay.
And so it was fine. It was no problem there at all. It was coming back to work at Kikyo Land Company, and we were just starting to do the cottages.
Right. So
timing was all one thing goes away, but the next thing fills the spot.
Tell me, did your experiences at NASA and your leadership there help you in terms of
I think all that goes together, you know.
Right.
And luck of the draw, right?
Sure. Tell me this, how would you advise young people today, coming up in this day and age, about, you know, how to pursue their career, especially if they have a aha moment, like you did in the driver's seat of that airplane. How do you maneuver or manipulate or work forward your idea to make your dream come true? How do you do that?
Well, if I look at one of my sons, he was an engineer. He went to work for NASA for a little while. Then I got him to work for Boeing for a friend of mine who was vice president of Boeing. And then Boeing said, you have salesperson skills.
Recognize that.
So they sent him to the European theater, and he sold 787s. The new 787, brand new airplane, hadn't been introduced yet. He sold, I don't know, 800 of these airplanes.
Holy smokes.
Then they took him back and he sold in the Orient. Same thing, 787s.
Yeah.
He said, you know what? Selling is easy. So then he retired and came back to San Diego. And now he's head of a fishing fleet.
Oh, okay.
Commercial fishing fleet.
Well, he finds his way, that's for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, people have all the luck in the world.
So do you stay in touch with your
family all the time.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And, Alan, what do you have to look forward to now in your life?
You mean like tomorrow, the next day?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
Well, I really want to get the music settled. I want to get the, well, one thing, I've got some special, nobody knows about it.
Oh, okay.
I have some records that are, you know who the Beatles are?
Sure.
Well, the Beatles cut a number of new records, never been played yet.
Oh, okay.
I have the package. So I've got to take that and figure out how to make the stylus so it doesn't damage the grooves in the records, because these are plain records.
I see.
So I've got to learn how to record without damaging. I'm just one recording from each of the.
Sure.
So I think there are about 30 of them, 30 new Beatles songs.
Wow.
So I want to make one master card, so to speak, of each record, and then have it go back to the Beatles, because it's their record.
Yeah.
That would be my contribution.
Wow, that would be fantastic.
And that's technology, because I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, you don't know. Well, I like that about technology, that you can always learn something.
Yeah.
Main thing, you don't become overwhelmed with it, right?
That's right.
I wanted to ask, just to kind of take us to the end of our journey here.
Yeah.
Now, when you were growing up, you knew that Kaua'i was a very special place.
Yeah.
And you knew there was a special sense of spirit here. Sure. And so the people that you met, people like Alitha Kaua'i and the people who worked for the plantation, they knew that Kaua'i was special and had a spiritual aspect. So can you tell us a little bit about those chicken skin times when you're growing up and how you developed that respect? Because you and I have talked about that, and I wanted people to know that you are a sensitive person spiritually, and that you do know that Kaua'i is a special place.
Yeah. Well, one thing comes to mind right off the bat was our Waimea dairy.
Yeah.
We had a herdsman.
Uh-huh.
Herdsman takes care of the cows, make sure they eat the right thing, with their milk at the right time of day.
Sure.
So I give him a huge gold star, you know.
Yeah, that's a pretty rare job there.
That's rare. So as far as things that really are outstanding, people, I would give him the #1 position. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know who's second yet.
And there was a man who worked on the ditch that you were telling me about that claims to have seen a menehune.
Okay, well, we have this carpenter. His name is Kazu.
Yeah.
He's very religious, very Japanese, and a good friend. If I wanted to find out how to make something, I go to Kazu. I said, how do I make this?
Yeah.
He helped me make my first surfboard.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
So we had a problem with the water that comes in from the Waimea River, the ditch water.
Right.
It goes through the menehune ditch. Well, menehune ditch. So he goes up there to do a repair to the intake. So he's up there. He's got his truck over here. He's got his toolkit over here. He's putting up wire and doing like this. And then he suddenly realized he needed a certain tool. Mm-hmm. So he started to go over to where the toolbox was.
Right.
And as he was reaching for a certain wrench, a menehune handed him the wrench. I swear, Kazu would not lie. He looked at the menehune, and he realized they were real.
Yeah.
He got in his truck, left his tools, everything right there. He went, and I happened to be in the office that day. He came to my father's office. He was crying. Kazu was crying.
Oh, my gosh.
He was totally broken to pieces. He was not Kazu at all. Mm-hmm. And my father said, well, relax, Kazu, relax. What's the matter? What's the matter? Menehune. Menehune, get real menehune up the river. Oh, he was just, I could see him.
Yeah. No, I know that feeling myself.
And that's the thing. He saw a real menehune.
Sure.
He's the only person I've ever heard of that told me directly they saw a real menehune.
I have never seen one, but I've heard them sneeze.
Oh, yeah. Where do they sneeze?
By the mountain up in Kaua'i.
Oh, no,
early in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I can hear them sneeze occasionally.
But how do you know it's a menehune?
Well, I mean...
They have a certain name?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think it's the feeling that you have when you have the experience.
Okay.
And that's why I said chicken skin, because, Auntie Aletha, she told us about her family's, the caves on the, I forgot the name of the area in Waimea, Poli'uli?
Poli'ali?
No, Poli... It's up
Oh,
on the hillside there.
I know.
And those caves were very special to her family.
That's right.
Yeah. And she was telling us about that feeling of seeing someone in the cave who was watching it, and she mentioned your name of someone who had gone up and checked it out too. So you must have had a lot of adventures with your friends back in those days.
Well, my cousin Tony, his father was a manager at Kaua'i, mine was manager at Waimea. Well, during the war, we used to get papayas. We had a lot of papayas growing. We used to go take papayas off the sea, and we'd take them up on top of the ridge that she's talking about to give to the military that were up there.
Oh, okay.
And they had their station up there. And this one time, Tony gave this one sergeant papaya that's just perfect.
Yeah.
And the sergeant took it and smashed it in his face like that.
Oh, no.
And I tell you, we both got on our bikes, went back down. We said, there's something wrong there.
Yeah.
And Aletha heard about it.
Oh, okay.
So she said, there's bad spirits up there.
Oh, okay.
So whoever this guy was, he got infected by some spirit.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't do a thing like that.
Sure.
So that's all we could see. We never knew the real answer.
Right.
But Aletha knows.
Yeah, in fact, she told us a story on how her family was there and they interacted with that spirit, and there was strong feelings.
Oh, sure.
And so you realize that in the world of the spirit, things do continue, occasionally you bump into some energy that maybe you don't want to.
She's the one that would know.
Yeah, she does. She did a whole one of her talks on menehune, and that was pretty rare.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty special.